Thank you again, everybody, for coming back to the Black and Rich Podcast. This podcast is designed for entrepreneurs to learn how to get rich, stay rich, and grow generational wealth. I don't know if you knew this, but nearly 48% of African American adults are obese. When we talk about growing wealth and growing our net worth, there's more than just money. Health is wealth. Doesn't matter how much money you have. If you don't have your health, you don't got nothing. This week we got LeBrent Speed to help us through not just weight loss, but a holistic approach to growing your business. How you doing today, LeBrent?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Now, I'm excited too. People don't know this, but I look up to LeBrent. He's one of the ones who, when I first started my business, gave me advice on how to grow. He's one of the most just fierce people who want to just go and get the money. You know, I think this episode is going to be great of learning how to actually grow wealth and grow your health. So, LeBrent, you lost, 120 pounds this year?
120 within the last year plus. It was quite a journey. Most of my adult life, I've been overweight, been an entrepreneur for my adult life, but that one thing was really a hindrance for me. So I really had to really lock in, like, what was that thing that was going to help me? Because I understood health is really holistic. People think about money, but like health is holistic. It's physical, it's mental, spiritual, emotional, it's financial. And so if your finances are good, but your health is poor, as you said, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. But there are also triggers emotionally and mentally that cause us to be prohibited from taking care of that. So it was really a lot of mind work, which I did in order to see myself in a different way. And I think that was really the key in order to really get the weight and to get to a more healthy weight than I've ever been.
So what made you, was there a day, was there a moment, was there something that was just like, no more? From now on, I'm going to make a change?
Well, I really originally started about 3 years ago. I started developing a really solid morning routine in which I started to really identify, through meditation, prayer, and I'm a Christian, I'm a minister, so I just developed a really strict routine. And in that routine, I started to identify major gaps, and one of them was my weight. Like, I was close to 350 pounds.
Wow.
And it was causing some adverse effects, right? Originally, in the summer of 21, I started to develop gout, but I didn't know what it was. I just knew my toe was like on fire and it was swollen, and I was like, what is this? I'm thinking, what's going on? I thought I had like cancer of the toe or something. I'm looking up WebMD, which is not good. So I'm doing all this stuff, and my daughter, who's 26, she's like, Dad, I think you have gout. And I'm like, no, I'm not old enough for gout. She's like, I think you do. So I'll never forget. So I went to the doctor. It was a lady I hadn't seen before. It wasn't a doctor because I had to go see her. And she's like I'm going over the symptoms, and she says, yeah, that sounds like gout. I was like, no, ma'am, I've never had that before. And she's like, well, you got it now. And I was like, well, okay. And then she said, do you eat a lot of red meat? I was like, not really, just 3-4 times a week. She said, that's a lot of red meat. And then she said, and she looked at me and she said, clearly you have a high-fat diet. And I was like,
what does that mean?
It was pretty obvious what she meant. And so I had to start making some decisions on what I wanted from my life, because I started to read statistics, and honestly, the number one killer in this country of any people are heart attacks and strokes, but especially among African Americans. And I'm, at the time I was 51 years old, and I'm like, and I just got married again, and I'm really grateful for my wife, Cassandra, and I was like, I don't want to spend the next 20 years of my life taking care of each other because we can't control what we put in our mouths. And so I really needed help, and so I really started to focus on what I wanted my life to look like. And so I've been over the last few years been a ferocious reader. So I've been reading a lot about transformation, business, health, and I'm like, this is not the life I wanted. But how do I get there? Because I knew internally I had an addiction to food, and so what were those steps? And so I just started walking and started developing some habits. But that wasn't enough, because everybody starts something and then you're done within a month. So I knew I needed help. And so one of the things I did was a friend of mine who had lost, and his name Eric, he's a health coach, and he had lost over 100 pounds, and he's been on American Ninja Warrior, all that. And he came in town. We've known each other from college. And he's just like, man, I'll help you. And so then he got me on a program. And over that time, I'm not saying there's been a downward trajectory the whole time, but over the last like 15 months, I've lost like 120 pounds.
Wow. I don't think I've ever met, you see the commercials, but I don't think I've ever met actually someone who's done it. Going through the process, were there times you're like, I'm going to turn him back, or was it always, I'm doing this? What was the hardest thing that you've bumped into as you've gone through?
There's a variety of harder things. One of the things that was difficult was my wife, who's incredibly supportive and loving. I love my wife. But she was like, I'm not doing it with you. So I had to do it by myself for the first 8 or 9 months. And so my heart, my prayer is like, man, I really want her to help me and do it with me. But I had to be very determined. And what I would suggest is that most people, and I kind of coach people on this now, most people tell me, LeBrent, you know what I need? I need more meal prep. I was like, no, you don't. You need mind prep. Because every person is overweight, has had that experience where you've seen a great recipe, a healthy recipe, and you write it down. And then you drive to the store. You get everything on that list. You're like, I'm going to eat something healthy. And then on your way home, you grab some fast food or some pizza. You put all those groceries you bought in the refrigerator, and then they spoil because you never buy them, you never eat them. Because it doesn't matter how good your meal prep is. If by Monday or Tuesday you don't want to eat it, then all of a sudden that meal prep is irrelevant. So what I try to do is help people understand the why behind them getting healthy. The why has to really fuel you when you don't feel like doing it. What is the vision for yourself? And so that was what I really had to lock in. And again, it hasn't been always roses, because when you're dealing with, and food is an addiction. If you have a food addiction, you have to eat every day. It's not like you can say, you know what, I'm not going to eat
cold
anymore.
turkey on food.
You can't go cold turkey. And so therefore, my heart is and over this time, it really, as I've always been a business coach and a sales coach, this really showed me what transformation looks like in terms of what I do. Because if your health is not in order, it really trickles down. Like, we understand there's a link between being overweight and sugar intake and depression, diabetes, all the physical things, but there are also mental manifestations of us not eating well. Like, we try to separate the mind and the body, but they're one. When your body's not getting what it needs, it triggers things in your mind. So that's why so many people talk about brain fog and tiredness. When I started to eat better and lose weight, I stopped snoring for the first time in my adult life.
Wow. I
stopped snoring, and my gout obviously went away, and my blood pressure went down. I'm 52. My blood pressure now is like 115, 110 over 65, 70. So for an African-American male, the doctor's like, that's incredible. But part of it is when you take care of your body, it takes care of you. And the clarity of mind, the feeling in your body, it all works together. And so oftentimes I think it's so easy for us to fixate on money we want. But we know through a lot of research, money doesn't make people happy. We say that, but there's research done to that shows us money does not make you happy. So if you don't have something deeper than that, you can get a bunch of money and be sick, and it's not worth it.
Yeah. Now, I always think about Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
This man had all the money in the world.
Yeah.
He had a cancer. He's gone. Billions, $200 billion can't save you if you don't have your health.
No, it can't. And now one of the things that really dawned on me as I started researching health and helping other people through it, there are only 5 behavioral issues that cause 80 to 90% of all sickness and disease in the world. Only 5.
Wow.
And it's all preventative. So most sickness and disease is preventative. And the 5 things that cause 80 to 90% of all sickness and disease in the world is drinking, smoking, poor diet, lack of exercise, and stress. And so if you can manage those 5 things effectively, the ideas of expanding your wealth gap increases, right? Because you can make money longer, you can be less sick, so you can be more effective, and you have an opportunity to have more generational impact. So when you realize those 5 key behavioral issues cause 80% of most disease and sickness, it really makes you focus differently on your life and your time and your energy.
Yeah. There's so many weight loss programs out there, Slim Fast, Weight Watchers. Why do you think you were so successful with this one versus other ones? Is there something special or a mindset? What sets what you do apart?
So I do, and again, if anybody wants to know about specifically my program, you can hit me up on social media. But what I want to do is help anyone that's doing any program. And so what I do is I actually teach the people. There are like 4 or 5 keys to success in health. And it starts with your mindset. The mindset is everything, because again, it doesn't matter how effective a program is. People are getting weight loss surgery, and it's not effective. It's not always effective, because if you don't change your habits, you can then drink your calories. You have a bunch of milkshakes and drink a bunch of pop. If you don't change what you're doing, and the only thing that changes what you're doing is your mindset. Because ultimately, if we all have a craving for everything, everyone's got attractions and cravings. Why do you have it? How did you get that? And, and as African Americans, you got to talk about how systematic oppression and racism impacted our food choices. Like soul food is some of the worst food for you, but it's delicious. But where did it come from? It came from the throwaway portions of the food, and we took it and made it made it something that's delectable to us. But ultimately, if you eat that on a regular basis, you are not going to be well. Like fried chicken, greens, and macaroni and cheese and cornbread taste delicious. But if you have a regular diet of that, my God, that's heart attack city. And ultimately, we have to start evaluating, can we have good relationships? And because especially from a Black perspective, everything we do is around food. If you're in church, everybody eats. We celebrate, we eat. We commensurate, we eat. We got a funeral, we eat. If we graduations, we eat. It is the thing we always had. Even when we were slaves, we had food. Even when we got out, it was our only thing. We may not have a lot of money, but we always had money. We always had food. And so we have to start having a different relationship with food. And in order for us to have a good time, we don't always have to eat some huge portions of sugar and fried foods in order to have a good time. We can fellowship and love one another outside of that. That doesn't mean we never eat that stuff again, but it does mean that doesn't have to be the center of our existence.
No, that's great. I mean, I think it's so hard when you talk to people. Oh, it's culture. It's what we've always done.
Yep.
Like, how can we break through that? I mean, people have been doing it forever.
Yep.
My grandparents always had chicken and yams and all this. What's an effective way to actually make that change?
I would say I always tell people the first thing to do to make an effective change in any area of your life is to really identify where you really are. This is what I would suggest, and if anyone is listening, please hear this. If you have an area of your life you know you need to change, I would say the biggest thing hindering most people from change, they cannot truly identify why they're that way, nor do they really identify where they really are. See, if like using a GPS system, I used my GPS to get here. Now, before GPS, probably before your time, we used to have to get old maps.
I would just be lost all the time.
So we had to get maps, but after that, we had MapQuest, where we had to actually print out directions and we had to follow them along. Right? That's funny to you, but I remember that. I remember our grandfather saying, "Man, you're not a real man if you can't read maps." And he used to have maps on the bed when he was taking a trip down south or coming back up here. So we used to have the map, but what is a key portion of taking any trip is you have to actually know where you are. I talk to a lot of my friends, family, and people I know who are obese, really overweight. They're just not really honest about where they are. It's just really, they're like, oh, I can lose weight when I want to. It's the same addiction conversation that everyone has. It's the same thing about alcoholics or drug addicts. They don't want to acknowledge they have a real problem. You go to a doctor, and the doctor tells you have to take this high blood pressure medicine, or else you're going to die. They'll take that blood pressure medicine, but when they say, well, the real root issue is that you need to stop eating the food you're eating, they're like, no, I'll just take the medicine. Mm-hmm. Which we know every pharmaceutical drug has a side effect. There's no pharmaceutical drug ever created that has a side effect. Now they're giving weight loss shots, and you take these shots, and there is no magic bullet to deal with your core issues. So the reality is you have to identify where I am and I need help. And if you don't take that step and say, you know what, this is not good, this is going to shrink my time. I mean, I've gone to several funerals in the last few months. People dying of heart attacks and strokes around my same age because we just would not change what we were doing. And I think ultimately, I'm not here to make anyone feel bad or anything like that. I was 51 years old and been overweight most of my life. God knows I can be self-righteous now. But what I will say is this: you have to own your choices. If you know, you can't be in delusional world, especially from a Christian background. People will start praying Like, Lord, heal so-and-so. Like, instead of asking Lord to heal so-and-so, we need to pray that so-and-so has more discipline and so-and-so makes better choices. Because if a person doesn't make another choice, that prayer is not really going where it needs to go. And I think ultimately that's where you had to, like when the doctor said, I said, well, I've never had gout before. She said, you got it now. And then she said to me after that, I said, well, I don't really believe in medication. I don't want to be on medication. And she looked at me and she said, do you want that pain in your toe? I'm like, no, I do not. It's very painful. She said, well, do you did take the medication or you change your diet? Which one do you want? Because those are the only two options. And at the time, I was like, she's very offensive. I was like, she's very offensive. I don't like her rudeness. But the reality is, it kind of jolted me. Like, these are my options. If I say I really don't believe in medication, then this is my other option. And so, because I've lost the weight, I don't have any side effects of gout anymore. I don't have to take any medication. So, she was right. I had to do one or the other. And so ultimately owning your situation, and if you own it, then that's how you can change it. But if you don't own it, you're going to be in the same position now, next year, as you will forever. So you got to own your position and really be honest about where you are.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think we talked about it a little bit, but how are you able to, encourage, let's say, there's people in your lives, you want to encourage them to get into shape, encourage them to go down that path, without making them feel guilty, without fat shaming, without doing all this extra stuff? Is there a way that you're able to do both? Push them into a direction of, hey, let's get fit, but without making the shame part.
So this is a good scenario. I do this in sales training, right? Because sales has a bad term, and if you're a small business owner, you're in sales. Most everyone's in sales. I don't care what you do. You have to sell an idea, sell a concept, sell the relationship. If you want to be in a relationship with someone, you got to sell them on why they want to be with you. My wife, some may know this, but those who are watching this first time, one of my other things I had to transform was my relationship issues. I had been divorced 3 times before my current wife, which seems like a lot, and trust me, it seemed like a lot to me. I remember when I talked to, I know my wife since we grew up together. We actually went to school together when we were growing up, so we've known each other since we were 8 years old. And I've always been attracted to her, I always liked her, but I never said anything. She was like my first girlfriend in the 4th grade. Matter of fact, when I first met her, she came to school, I was always going, my mom sent me to private school because public school wouldn't accept me because I said I was slow. So my mom put me in private school. I was mostly the only black kid in the class. And I remember, and it wasn't the 1 or 2 black girls in the class. I didn't think they were really cute. And so I remember when she came to my school in like the 4th grade, and I saw her, I was like, oh my God, my mom put her in the school for me. She wants me to marry a black girl. So I went up to her in recess. I said, do you have a boyfriend? She's like, no. I said, well, I'll be your boyfriend. She said, okay.
Wow.
And I just walked off.
That sounds about right.
I secured the relationship and left.
Yeah.
And so we've known each other. And so as we got older, we kind of, moved on separate lives. And then we kind of came back. And I've always wanted to say something. But it's like, man, I messed up so much. I didn't want to really be in a situation where I got rejected by someone you grew up with. That's really embarrassing. Mm. So I remember asking her once, we were just talking as friends. I said, hey, would you ever marry someone that's been in prison? And she said, I don't know. It depends. Depends on what they've been through. Like, are they rehabilitated and all that stuff? And she said, but I think I will. It depends on the situation. I may. And I said, well, I've never been to prison, but I've been divorced 3 times. So
that's a good trick.
Yeah, it was. And so she laughed, and I said, well, man, well, how come you never went out with me before? And she said something that really was triggering. She said, you never asked. And a lot of times our lives are set up before us because we never ask for what we really want. And I think when it comes to weight, we never really ask, what can we really be? Am I stuck in this body? Would people dare to dream on what you can be? What can I be fit like ever in my life? And I think most people are just scared to ask and scared to dream. And so I think you've got to be in a position where you can dream. What does it look like for you to be your most healthy self and to be fit, to be able to do things you've never done before? And so I really try to help people to start dreaming. And in terms of when you're getting people to want to move from where they are, one, shame doesn't help anyway. Actually, shame produces more of the same behavior because it reinforces identity. If you shame someone and they're drinking, shame someone because they're overweight, it just makes them want to go hide and eat. So they just go eat privately instead of eating publicly. That's not going to help them. I know someone tried to shame me out of being overweight. It wasn't going to help me. I just go eat my pizza like Nutty Professor. I often think of Nutty Professor.
Like, fine, I just won't do it here.
Yeah, I won't do it in front of you.
Yeah.
So that doesn't help. All motivation is intrinsic. Real motivation is intrinsic. So what really helps is finding out through conversation what does an ideal health look like to them. What would it mean for them, to be at their ideal size? What would it mean if they lost 50 or 100 pounds? What would that mean to them? Why would that be important to them? I ask a question, it's just something simple like, if you were to lose weight, what would that look like to you? If you were to get on a different program, what would that look like to you? What is something you can do in 6 months if you really got serious about your health that you can't do now? I think once we open up people's minds to the possibility, and you have to remember, most people haven't thought this in years. I talked to so many people, they've given up on the idea that this is possible. So you got to get people in the mindset like, what if? Just to get them to dream, because once they dream, that's when things can happen.
That's great. I mean, I can't even imagine, losing 120 pounds in a year. Like for me, just maintaining weight's hard. Did you have support groups? Did you have, I know you worked through a program, but did you have other people around you that were able to prop you up?
Yeah, I would say one of the critical components, and I teach this for people, is one of the critical components is creating your own society. Listen, if you're overweight, you typically have a bunch of people around you that are overweight. Research tells us we make as much money, we have the same credit as the 5 closest people to us. Society is strong. When you create your own community, it's super strong. Influence is strong. Most people who've known me for a long time, I'm not even at my goal weight now. So I still want to lose 25 or 30 more pounds. But for people who know me, my kids, my older kids, they've never seen me at this weight. I haven't been this weight since I was like 21. So ultimately, it's a shock to them. And what you have to be careful of, not to cut people off, but to realize if you want to do something you've never done before, you got to go around people you've probably never been around before. You've got to find groups and pockets of people who can encourage you, who can strengthen you. Because when it gets hard and you don't feel like eating right and you don't feel like eating the same thing you had yesterday, you need people who are going to motivate you. I realize I say this hopefully no one takes offense to this, but I realize something from my own life. Fat people have fat thoughts and fit people have fit thoughts. And I knew in order to get out of my own head, I need to be around more people that are going to think fit. What are they doing on the weekends? What are they doing on Friday night? It's not about happy hours of drinks or chicken wings or brunch on Sunday, which is my favorite thing. In the past, my favorite thing to do is brunch. So the questions, what are they doing? What activities, what hobbies they have? What's their conversation like? And so I started to immerse myself. A really good book I would really highly recommend is Atomic Habits by James Clear. Another really good book about habits is called The Power of Habits, Charles Dunham. And they talk about the habit loop, which is a trigger, response, routine, reward. When you really when you understand your habit loop, in order to interrupt that habit loop, that trigger, in order to interrupt it, you got to find other people that have different habits. Because if all the friends around you, it's like if you're on crack, you can't hang around crackheads no more. Now, in food, it's hard to just call people to eat food. But what you do got to find people who are not necessarily addicted to food. You got to find out, you got to be intentional. What am I going to do on Saturday that they're doing? And when I start to do that, it becomes a lot easier to really start making different habits. You have to find, James Clear says in his book, you got to find groups or societies in which your desired behavior is their normal behavior. And so whenever you want to make a change, you've got to find a different group you're connecting with. If you don't do that, you're never going to really cut loose. You can't, because what's going to happen is you've done good all week, and everyone can relate to this. You've eaten good all week, and then you have one meal on a Friday, and then you weigh yourself. It's like, I've done perfect, absolutely perfect, and I can't believe I haven't lost a pound. Because what happens is when you're losing weight, your body is trying to, what you set your BMI, your body's always trying to get to that state. You've been losing weight, and it's like, are you starving yourself? Are you really trying to lose weight? It's asking these questions. As soon as you give it that influx of sugar, salt, sodium, friedness in your system, it says, great, it holds on to every pound. It needs to know you're serious enough, and you need to get your body in a position where you're getting the fat burn for a period of time. So whenever you go great all week, and then you eat off on Saturday and Sunday, you wonder why you're not losing weight, because this is the refrain everyone talks about. First of all, listen to your language. I tried everything and I haven't lost weight. Have you tried everything? Is that a real thing? You know, no, you haven't tried everything. You've tried a lot of things, but you haven't tried everything. So language is important because all this is connected to identity.
That's great. I kind of want to cover a little bit of the business aspect as well with it. So, you know, you've been in business your whole life. You've been growing businesses. How does somebody, maybe it's not weight loss, maybe it's business, maybe it's whatever. How does someone turn a passion that they're really good at into a business?
You know what? One of my favorite quotes about this is Maya Angelou. She says, never chase money. Rather, chase the thing you love to do and then do it so well people can't take their eyes off you. We've you know, I think we're in a society now where people think money is the end goal of everything. But there's a really good book I'm reading right now. It's called, it's about the 1938 study from Harvard. It's called The Good Life. Anyone's interested in the book is called The Good Life. And it's talking about the 1938 study. It's the longest study done in history about human happiness and what makes humans survive. And they don't just ask them questionnaires. They're doing interviews with them. They're taking their blood, MRIs, all this. And there are people who've been in it they were in it for like 70 years, like from the 14 to 84, and then they started studying their children. And between this study and other studies, we've identified only 4 things that really make people happy and healthy. Only 4 things: nutrition, exercise, purpose, and good relationships. And so it's so important for you to really figure out your purpose. Dr. Martin Luther King says, if a man or a person has not found out what they're willing to die for, they're not fit to live. And so a lot of times people are going through the motion, but they're never in their purpose. And so you're making money, but they're not making life. And so what I would encourage people how to turn your passion is really tap into what do you feel like you were designed to do? Now, when you're younger or even when you get older, you can't flow in that. So what I tell people is just do a little bit of where you are right now. It could be a part-time passion, right? It could be if you want to do a podcast or fitness or whatever, just do a little bit. You got to be consistent though. You can't just do it on one Saturday and then you don't do it for a month. If you got a part-time passion, you got to dedicate 10 to 20 hours a week to it. At least 10 hours and say, I'm going to schedule this time, I'm going to put my energy into it. Because we know in business, you don't always feel like doing it. One thing I learned about discipline, about business, weight loss, or anything else, you don't always feel like doing it. So you've got to do it when you don't feel like it. You've got to get up when you don't feel like getting up. And so I think identifying the thing that you want to do and then doing it consistently versus the part-time hobby. And because once you treat it like a hobby, everybody else is going to treat it like a hobby. And then ultimately your mind won't ever turn that into profit, because hobbies, rare they turn to profits. You have to be intentional. And so I would say start small, but be consistent with that and watch it grow.
That's great. So kind of when you say start small, you know, what does that mean for somebody? Hey, I have let's say I'm a business coach, you know, how am I able to get business clients? How am I able to, you know, do you go buy ads? Do you network? Do you cold call? How are you actually trying to go make this a real thing?
So I would say before you actually try to get clients, the question becomes, are you competent in what you're doing? Like before you're a business coach, are you effective? Are you a representation of what you're selling? Because ultimately, if you're a business coach but you haven't shown success in that thing, you need to develop your skills. Just like I'm helping people through health. That's one of the things I do. Well, ultimately, they can see my life, right? They can say, you lost 120 pounds, maybe you can help me. Well, if I hadn't lost any weight and people are like, you're asking me, well, how do I go get clients and how do I go sell and all that's secondary to the first thing. And so you have to be a representation of what you're purporting. It should come out of your pores. You should be reading books on business. You should be studying business. You should be an expert in your field. And ultimately, before you look for people to make money off of, who can you help? Who can you serve? Most of the greatest people in our country have built incredible businesses, started off as interns. They serve places. How can I help you? How can I benefit you? What can I do? And when you serve, you have that servant mentality. Adam Grant has a good book called Give and Take. And in that book, he talks about 3 types of people: givers, takers, and exchangers. Takers are people obviously who take more than they receive. Exchangers is quick pro quo. You do for me, I do for you. But the people who are most effective in the world and people who do the most are givers. So I always tell people, before you look to try to sell anything, what are you giving? Give yourself away before you try to ask people to buy from you. And I think when we do that, that's when things can start working organically, and people will really want to give you more business and refer you business if you, one, are a representation of what you're selling, and two, you're looking for ways to just serve people and help people.
I love that. I mean, I think I see a lot of businesses when they first get started, that's not their thought. Their thought is, this is what I do. I'm going to try and maximize my profit as much as possible. But the actual of, do I love what I'm doing? Is this actually good? Do people enjoy my content, or do people enjoy my work? Isn't there. And it's all about the money, and it doesn't work.
And ultimately, we know it doesn't work because who likes that? Like, we've all been in a situation when you feel like you're being sold something. It doesn't feel good because people want to connect on a real level, especially in this world where we have AI and all this technology. There'll always be something in the human spirit that wants to connect with another human being. We want to connect in a genuine, authentic way. And if you're just selling me, even if we do networking and different networking groups, and you can see when people are like passing on, the first thing they want to do is pass you a business card. Hey, I'm selling this. It's like, I've done that. I've been that guy. And I realized this doesn't work. It's just passing out business cards. So I think being a resource to people, how can I help you? Tell me more. Listening, coming in a situation, asking questions, being a good questionnaire is a really important aspect of business. What are the needs? What are business? If you want to be a business coach, asking questions. What do businesses need more than anything right now? Are you asking business, what do you need right now? What is the biggest pressing thing? Finding how do you fulfill a gap before you asking them to write you a check. And I think that's really important. But it takes competency. That means you have to spend time on your craft. One thing I do just to make sure I'm sharp in health and business, I read between 70, 80 books a year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I'm making sure that I'm staying competent. I read hundreds of articles a year. I'm pouring in myself. I spend money on training and coaching and mentorship. I always tell people, why would you ask someone to pay you to be a coach if you've never paid anyone else to coach you? So ultimately, the best leaders have always been the best followers. And so I would say you got to invest in you. That time, that 5 to 10 hours a week, you should be investing in you. What courses can I get? What programs can I get? What books should I be reading? You need to be competent because people who come to the table with competency, they just show up different.
No, definitely. So when someone wants to work with you, let's say either business or just holistic coaching, what does that look like for you?
So it really depends on one. I think health looks, as I said, in 5 key areas: physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, financial. It really starts with, I would say, anyone before I even work with, is identify what you want to transform in your life. My heart is to help people transform their lives so they can fulfill their mission and purpose on this earth. So what is that thing that you feel like is holding you back to the next level of your life? Is it really the business thing, or really is it an emotional? Because if we just identify things you need to do in your business, develop yourself, train yourself, get the skills necessary to be good in business. If you haven't done it, the financial part is not the issue. You're not sharpening yourself mentally and emotionally. So you got to sharpen yourself mentally and emotionally first. So I think it's important to be able to, just what we talked at the beginning, identify where are you really? Where are you really in your life? Identify that thing. And once you identify, I want you to ask yourself a question. If I get this situation changed, if I transform this area of my life, whether it be my health, my mind, my emotions, my finances, my spirit, if I transform that area of life, what would that do for me in 6 months? What does that look like? And start gaining a clear picture, because that's the beginning. Then we can start tracking a strategy in order to get you there. But if you don't know where you're going, I can't give you a vision for you. I can only help you get where you want to go. And so I can help you with strategy. I might refer you out to other people who are very tacticians when it comes to business. My strength is health, sales, business, entrepreneurialism. Even spiritual, I have a nonprofit organization called Transform Men, which is a Christian-based nonprofit. When we talk about, men are dealing with addiction issues or things of that nature. So I think, but whatever your spiritual beliefs are, you have to be authentic to what that is. You have to be, if you say you're a Muslim, are you doing the things that a good Muslim would do? If you say you're a Christian, are you doing things that a good Christian would do? If you are atheist, are you congruent to your belief system? I think most of the time people aren't congruent to their own belief system. Like they're not living an authentic life. They're telling people I am this, that, and the other, but their private life doesn't match their public life. So I think what's most important is people become congruent to who they are. I knew that my outer body was not a reflection of who I really feel like I am. See, what people see in me now is what I've been seeing for 2 years. This is in my head. Matter of fact, I'm not even where I've seen myself, right? You're only seeing a glimpse. You've got to be that person on the outside with people that you've been on the inside. And I think most people issue is they're not congruent. They lack that integrity. And there's no reason to condemn yourself or beat yourself up. But that's how I started working with people. I started asking really deep questions, understanding where we are, to see if I'm even a good fit for them, or if I can help someone that can be a good fit for them.
Oh, definitely. Just kind of logistic-wise, so people who are watching know, do you offer like a free session to start? And then how do you work? Is it you pay per session? It's an overall body? How does that work for you?
So it depends on what they want to change. If it's a health situation, it may be a monthly thing, but it depends on the nutritional plan they get. If they're doing business, I might charge you monthly for a business coaching or sales coaching. If it's speaking, I am a speaker, so I speak at companies, I speak at organizations. I talk about transformation in terms of your company. So what does transformation look like for your company? How do you get people on wellness? I spend a lot of time on wellness, on a really stringent morning routine. Like for me, I get up at 4 a.m. and I have a 1 hour morning routine before I exercise.
Wow.
Yeah, but that to me strengthens all 5 key areas of my life. That hour and a half or 2 hours I spend in the morning fuel my health mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and financially. So really, I really look at what's your morning routine look like? How do you use in your own words? And so it just really depends on what you're looking for specifically. And we can talk, but I will do a 30-minute consultation with anyone for free, just to talk about what their goals are and see if I can help them. Because ultimately, everyone's not ready. If they're be honest with themselves, people will see my results and say, "Well, I want that," but the reality is they don't want the work; they want the result.
Yeah. You want to wake up.
Yeah, people can see my marriage, especially people who know me. It's like, man, you have a beautiful marriage. Like if you see it, me and my wife, we've known each other. We have a great vibe. I'm blessed to be with her. They see now, like you've been divorced all these times. Now you have a healthy relationship that can happen to me. Yeah, but there was a lot of work I had to put in myself, therapy, counseling, submitting myself to people around me who knew better. I had to go through certain situations in order to be prepared for this relationship. So whatever opportunity you're looking for, that you have in front of you, you got to prepare yourself for that opportunity, whether it be mentally, physically, emotionally. You can't run a marathon. I can't say, hey, Rich, I'm gonna go out and run this marathon. You got to prepare for that marathon, right? So I would suggest people got to put that time in preparation. So you may not be ready to take that first step yet. That's okay, but you can do the preparation. For 6 months before I even lost a pound, I had an affirmation I said every single day.
Wow.
And so I hope it didn't. I like to think it shouldn't have took me 6 months to start acting. I know better, but ultimately I prepared my mind, and I would suggest everyone can do that now. You can start preparing your mind for that change you want.
Oh, that's great. I kind of want to talk about a little bit about your nonprofit.
Yep.
So it's for men who are coming out of addiction and rehab type of situation?
Well, it's not just men in addiction. So it's called Transform Men International. You can go to our website, transformmen.org. And it's a Christian-based nonprofit, and really it's a biblically based organization. And our basis of our theme scripture is Romans 12:1, be not conformed, or 12:2, be not conformed to this world, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So we're really men who've been transformed by the power of God to help other men be transformed by the power of God. So we do a variety of different events and breakfasts to really talk about some of those areas you want to be transformed in. Mental health, we talk about that from a Christian perspective. Financial, one of my board members is a partner for an accounting firm. He talks about that. We talk about sexual addiction. If you're coming from an addiction, what does it look like to come out of that? We also talk about race, because that's a big conversation. As men of God, as Christian men, how do we deal? We had a 2-month seminar called Transform Men in a Divided World. So how are men of color and black men, white men, different groups of men, there are Christians, how do we deal with this racial divide in a godly way. So we deal with a variety of topics. We usually do some breakfast. We have a couple of events coming up April 22nd, which is a breakfast. You can go to our website, transformmen.org. But it really is about men who feel like they're transforming. And I believe one of the most powerful ways to stay transformed, if you change in a particular area, we know psychologically this work is to help someone else. We are social creatures, and so therefore, if you do something from a selfish motive just to be better yourself, I want to make more money just for me, that typically won't stick, and it's fleeting. When you think of, one of the reasons that kept me in this transformation path is because I would think about the people I would help after me, who would see my life, and I could change my whole kid's perspective and everything else around me. So I really kept it at the forefront of my mind. So I would really encourage people, whatever transformation that you're going through, be cognizant of who can this help once you go through it. And when you keep that at the forefront of mind, it makes it a lot easier for you to go through the process.
No, definitely. Definitely. So let's see here. Do we have any questions on the board here? So it says, I feel like I know what to do. What is hard is having a discipline to follow through. Do you help with that?
Yes, that's a great one. I love that one because I hear it all the time. People, first of all, people often say, I lack the discipline. That's something that most people will use the word. And I would tell you right now, you don't lack the discipline. Think about your life. There's things you have done, whether you were a father or a mother, whether you went to college, that require discipline. Everyone had to execute discipline in some area of your life. What you didn't do is transfer that into the other area that you need help in. So first of all, words I said earlier, words are important. You don't lack discipline. You do have it. You just haven't executed it. By telling your mind that, your mind is always trying to confirm what you say. Your mind is always looking for confirmation bias. If I say I love blue shirts, you know what you see blue shirts. If you ever buy a red car, next thing you know, you see red cars everywhere. Why is that? Because your mind always wants to confirm what you did. If you say I like discipline, your mind will put that in there, and every time you try something new, it will say, you know what, Rich, I don't have the discipline. So one, you do have the discipline. Now the question is, how do I execute and follow through? And it starts with identifying where you are. So say if that issue is weight, you want to lose weight and you can't lose weight. First of all, start out, why? Where am I at right now? How much overweight am I? When's the last time you've been on a scale? There were years I never got on a scale. You need to start with a good number. Where am I? Where do I want to be? If you go to a doctor and the doctor says you need to lose 50 pounds, 60 pounds, okay, this is where I am. You don't try to hide it. Don't run from the scale. Don't try to act like and cover it up. Get on that scale, see what it is, identify where you are, and say, what do I need help next? So the first one is being honest with yourself. You do have the discipline, so I would say encourage you to use different words. And once you start understanding that, then you can start taking the necessary steps in order to get you where you want to go.
Nice, yeah. Do we have any more on there?
Have you ever studied thought work? Yes, I spend quite much of my books on meditation. One of the things I do, I spend is on meditation. Now, sometimes I can freak out certain Christians, but thought work to me that's where it starts. There's a really good book I would really encourage people to call. It's called Peak Mind. Dr. Jha, J-H-A. She did research on the power of meditation. Now, what she did is identify the ideal amount of time that you need to spend every day in order to meditate. And she identified 12 minutes being that ideal time. And the reason why meditation is so powerful, and I think there's spiritual implications from scriptural and just natural implication on mind work, the reason why it's important is because meditation is the only way for you to kind of clean your brain out. We live in a world right now that people think we work more than ever before, but that's actually not true. Statistically, we work less than people did in the 1950s, but because we're always connected to our phone, we're always on social media, we feel like we're constantly working. Your mind needs to break away from that. And so that meditation gives you an opportunity. Meditation in terms of mind work, when you really lock into that, I do that every day. The first thing every day I do 12 minutes of meditation. And it's just quietness, just whatever word you like to use so it don't freak you out, just quiet time. Because you need your mind to be able to focus. One thing I love, there's a couple of stories she uses in the book, but she used to do research on military people. one of the ones that she did was Elite Forces. And she realized the ones who did the meditation actually could see what other people can't see. And real quick story about that, there was a story in which they were going up this ridge in Afghanistan, and they identified these insurgents, and they were calling coordinates to bomb these insurgents that were on this ridge. And these are highly trained soldiers. They're calling in, and one of the guys stops and says, "Stop! Don't call it in." They're like, "Man, this is our window. We got to take it." He said, "No one there has guns." Now, these are the most highly trained soldiers in the world, but no one else noticed they didn't have guns except for that guy. Well, then they decide, well, we don't have to shoot them. Let's just go tackle them. Once they tackle them, a bunch of women and kids come from the tents. They weren't insurgents. They were nomads. But the only one who noticed it was the guy who meditated, because your mind needs to shut down so it can recalibrate to really understand what it wants. So I really highly encourage anyone, one, to read the book, Peak Mind, but also to spend a few minutes every day to meditate, quiet, and breathe, so that you can be able to hear from yourself your real thoughts, what you really want. So yeah, I do a lot of work on that. So I think that's really important, because that's part of the mind. That's the parts of health is having mental health, and in order to have mental health, you gotta be quiet with yourself sometimes.
Definitely. Do you have a teacher that you use for meditation, or an app or something else that you use?
No, I
just
don't.
Quiet?
No. I what I usually use is, obviously I believe in prayer and reading the Bible. But I read a lot of books, and so Dr. I don't want to butcher his name, but he does a lot of meditation. I read all his books, and so I read it because I want to make sure that I'm clear. And again, I don't want to freak anybody out that doesn't into it. But what I would say is, if nothing else, just quiet your mind for a few minutes every day. So yes, I spend a lot of time reading about it, and almost every successful person has some form of it, because that's why they become very clear about what they want. Most people don't do it because they're not clear on their life. That's why their life just kind of meanders. That's why even one of the things you said, I'm very intense, because I'm very intentional about what I want. So that's kind of how I use mindfulness. So
no, definitely. I mean, I use the Headspace app. That's helps me. It has the guided meditations, because I can't. I'm ADHD, so I'm going crazy. I need someone to tell me what to do.
Well, listen, whatever works for you, just do it. Like, I don't really, I'm not into telling people what to do.
You said, I like to have a coach, but I assume I can't afford it. How much do your services cost, if that's appropriate to ask?
That's appropriate. And so it depends on your situation. If you're looking at sales coaching can range in between $500 and $1,500 a month. But ultimately, we're looking at getting you certain things, like starting you off. It depends if you're starting a business. I might not charge you that much if you're starting a business. But I don't, I want people to be a little more clear where they are. In terms of my nutritional program, ultimately, they actually are some nutritional products they get. They don't actually pay me directly. And so it's really cost effective, because ultimately, some people say it's expensive not to purchase coaching or purchase this. I always tell them it's expensive to be ignorant. You want some shortcuts. I always, two things I coach people all the time, and I hope this helps. There's two things I'll tell you to take off the table whenever you're looking for something new in your life. Take these two things off the table. I can't afford it, and I don't have time. Those are the easiest things to say whenever you're in a pitch. It's like you can pull it from your back pocket. Oh, I can't afford it. It doesn't even make your mind think about it. It doesn't make you come up through solutions. Take that card off of your table. When it comes to something you need or want, take off the words, I can't afford, and I don't have time. Because we all have time to do what's important to us, and we all can afford the things we really want. So take that off the table and ask yourself, what if I were to do this? What would it look like? If I were to change this, what would it look like? Don't ask yourself about the money. You can figure that out. So I always encourage people, take time and money, because it's so easy to use those. Just like anything, you're talking to somebody, and you go, oh, I'm busy. People are busy, but not effective. And so we use busyness as a shield to not do the things we want to do. So I would encourage people, take those two things off the table, really identify what you want, and then work your way backwards. Because I promise you, if you do that, you can figure out where there's a will, there is a way. You've heard it 1,000 or 1,000,000 times, but it's true. And so take those two things off the table. A friend of mine, a mentor of mine said, Brent, being healthy is expensive. I said, being sick is more expensive. Like if you got doctor bills, like it's more expensive. The cost. I used to be at the chiropractor every week because my knees and my back. You know, I don't have to. I mean, I still go, but I don't have to go because of pain. That's pretty much gone. When you take 120 pounds off your body, your knees thank you, your back thanks you.
Yeah.
You know, so like in this wet snow we had last week, my wife and I shoveled for 2.5 hours. The year before, I would have been on my floor with ice pack. I felt fine because my body was ready for it. So I would encourage people, don't take those things off the table. Use your mind for creativity. Create what you want and then work your way backwards. So that's two things I always tell people.
And I love that. The number one reason for bankruptcy in the United States is medical bills.
Yes.
The number one reason. $500 a month to get coaching is not going to bankrupt you.
No. You're absolutely right, because what happens, you do pharmaceutical pills, that causes other efforts. I know people get, stuff with their kidneys and all this. Even when I had the gout, she's like, well, they take the pills, but then we got to monitor your kidneys because they have adverse effects. I'm like, what? Like, it's like all these other things they got to do. So yes, and that's true. The number one cause of bankruptcy is health-related issues. So take care of your health, they'll take care of you. So
yeah. I love your glasses.
Thank you.
I said. Have you ever looked into Monroe Institute sound frequency therapy?
I know. I'm not familiar with that at all. I mean, there's so many things out there people get into. So I don't want to speak on that.
What kind of advice would you give someone with ADHD?
Well, I'm no doctor, and so I don't want to give any medical advice. What I would say with anything like that is that, one, we all know that's been subscribed to more than ever, and I don't know if it's, but we do know there's a lot of research that tells us that diet, exercise can really have a real strong effect on those things. And so people who have ADHD, just from research I've done, should really be mindful of sugar, caffeine, any of those accelerants at all. You should really have a cleaner diet. It's going to help the clarity of your mind. And I think, as we talked about, meditation is really important. Your mind is like a muscle. The more you discipline, the better it gets. It's hard at first. Yes, meditating, being quiet for a certain period of time is really difficult. But the more you do it, the better it is. Just like working out. First time you work out, the second time it hurts. You get pain. I lift weights now. It doesn't cause me. I don't get sore. Why? Because my body's getting used to it. Your mind is the same way. It has to get used to it. And so it's important that you start these practices. There is a direct linkage between our ADHD and sugar and all that other things. So I would say and I think the rise in these ADHD and other mental illnesses directly relate to our food, because we have foods. Most of the foods that we have access to are low in nutrition and high in calories, and so your body compensates by eating a bunch of it because you're not really getting the nutritional needs met. So I think with any of those ailments, you've got to lock in your nutrition, exercise, and also your mindfulness. I think those are three things that are critically important.
Definitely. Any more questions? Is there one that you can narrow it down that keeps people away from getting their potential?
Yeah, I would identify one thing that keeps people from reaching their potential. I think transformation only happens when you can identify with a thing. What happens for most people, and when it comes to, especially when we're talking from a black perspective, well, one of the things that hinders most people of color is because if you can't identify with something, you can't achieve something, right? Whether it be your weight or finances, whatever. Most people really, at the end of the day, they're saying, I have a hard time getting motivated, I have a hard time. The reality is they don't see themselves as that person. That looks like a different person to them. That fit person doesn't look like who they think they are. That wealthy person doesn't look like who they think they are. So they can't identify with them. And if you can't identify with that person, you can never be that person. Identity is everything. And so what I would encourage people from day one is start to identify. One of the things I did is I started taking pictures on Pinterest and other places and just looking at pictures of things I identified with. It makes your mind more susceptible and open to the idea. But most people, they don't shift, they don't change, fulfill their purpose because they don't see themselves as an author. They don't see themselves in healthy relationships. They don't see themselves as healthy and fit. They have all these blockages that don't see, and so therefore it's impossible to constantly do something you don't feel like is really you. So you've got to change your identity in order to change your habits, and they help one another.
I love that. Going a little bit into that, when you look at black wealthy people and white wealthy people, they look a lot different a lot of times, right? We have business owners who get a lot of wealth, and then what the first thing they do is they buy a car, a really nice car. They buy chains. They buy the things they identify with the successful people we've seen, which have been rappers, who have been entertainers and everything, and they don't understand the concept of when rich people they didn't get rich because they bought the cars.
No.
They got rich because they bought property. They had investments, and off the interest they bought that car.
Yeah, well, more specifically, there's a book, older book called The Millionaire Next Door, The Millionaire Mind. It's 2 books written off a doctoral thesis, and he breaks down to minute detail like the wealth of whites, Latinos, African Americans, Asian Americans, and he breaks down like the percentages, and it's really powerful exercise because you're right when it comes to us. And again, you're talking about wealth. You're talking about we get rich. And you're right. We move. We buy mostly Mercedes-Benz. We buy these elaborate cars because what happens is we're trying to fulfill something that money can't fill. And I really, and if time allowed, if we have another time, you can talk about the impact. I think the greatest impact that systematic oppression and racism had on us was identity. Because we don't get money or success in order to carry on, to give wealth to our next generation, to do that. We get it so we can show you we have it.
Yep.
Because ultimately we're trying to feel something we don't have. The clothes, the cars, the vacations. That's why a lot of people spend all their time on Pinterest and or Instagram or Facebook. They're on these things, these apps, and we're seeing people take vacations, but we don't know how they're taking those vacations. We don't know what's going on with them. And ultimately, we're not asking deeper questions. And so I would really encourage people that if success is important to you, why do you want it? What do you want to do with it? What impact do you want to have versus, seeing people and, we looking at rappers and everything, and they got, necklaces that are worth $1 million. I'm thinking, wow, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? And we have all this stuff that we're showing off, but that doesn't, no one gets to 80 or 90 years old on their deathbed and say, you know what, I should have bought one more chain. No one says that. No one says, you know what, I should have bought a bigger house. You know what, my car wasn't nice enough. No one says that. The thing that most people think about when they die is who they should have spent more time with, the relationships they should have built. It goes back to what I told you, those 4 things that make a human healthy and happy: their nutrition, their exercise, their purpose, and their relationships. Those are things that really matter. So your money and your time should be spent on fueling those 4 things.
100%. Chris Bellinger said, "What food should we be eating? Do you have?" I know there's so many new diets. I tried everything. I've tried the carnivore. I've tried vegan. I've tried pescatarian. Whatever it is. Is there one that, or is it just about disciplining yourself?
Yeah, I don't really get into specifics of foods because ultimately we live in a society. You literally can Google, like, look on your phone right now and say healthy foods to eat. It would give you. I mean, you were doing Chat GPT the other day. Like, you can just say into your phone. Your phone can give you a list of foods to eat. Literally, just go look, what are the best diets? It'll give you like 19 diets. The question isn't going to get the information. We have tons of information. We don't have a lack of information in our society. We have a lack of wisdom. Wisdom is the key, because wisdom can sift through the information and then discern which one you're going to do. And so the first thing I would tell people to do is there are tons of information about what programs to do, tons of foods, you can go look up stuff. What I would tell you is, one, is you got to identify a system that works. And once you do the system, don't go back and forth. Well, I like this one because I can eat. Most people, I find, choose systems because it allows them to eat food. They, just carnivore. I want to eat a bunch of meat. But then we see some research. If you're doing too much high-fat diets, high-fat foods, it's causing issue with people, cholesterol, high blood pressure. And so you've got to be mindful of just getting something that's going to let you do what you want to do. At some point, you're going to have to restrict yourself. You're going to have to say no to certain things.
There's no magic pill.
There's no magic pill. There's no, the drugs they're giving people now and telling them take these medicines. And they have all these side effects to them. Listen, you're going to have to look yourself in the mirror and say, what do I want? And what can help me get there? And then just lean into other people who have done it. Like, what are they doing? And I promise you, everything they're doing, I always find people, it's interesting, and people will look at other fit people and it's like, well, I know so-and-so, they have cake every Saturday. That's not should be your concern. Like, you shouldn't be worried about the one thing they eat that you see them eating unhealthy. What did they do all week long? Not the one cake you saw them eat on Saturday. And first of all, if you see the fit person eating cake on Saturday, that don't mean you should be eating 4 times a week, right? So I don't really get into foods. There's tons of materials out there, and obviously people can reach out to me personally. But I would tell you, it's not going to be always what you want, and you're going to have to discipline your taste buds. One thing I always tell people, over time, your taste buds will subject to your mind. But most time, we're living a life where our taste buds are ruling us. Even think about something as general as asking, what do we do when we ask somebody what they want for dinner? We ask them a specific question. What do you have a taste for? You know what I noticed? Fit people never ask that question because they don't live their life based on taste buds. And when you live your life on taste buds, it's hard to break out of that. Honey, what you especially spouses and partners is like, oh, what do you want? What do you got a taste for tonight? That's usually a bad recipe because your taste is going to want some sugary, salty, and fatty. Yeah. And that's not congruent to your health goals. So now I'm not saying you got to eat food that's nasty or my food is good and all that, but you can't be a slave to it. So I would tell you, start asking yourself different questions so you can get different answers.
Definitely. Any more questions? Can you talk about knowing your value a little bit more? So you say you saw yourself like you are right now 2 years ago.
Yeah.
What does that mean for an individual? Let's say I'm an individual right now. I'm not where I want to be. I'm not there. How do I see myself at that value I want to get to?
So I won't go all of it into day one. So my morning routine, and a good book I'll recommend for that, I'm going to recommend a lot of books, is if you want to know how to create a morning routine, I'm not going to take credit for this one, The Miracle Morning, Hal Elrod. Very good book. Will help you create. So I kind of use that as my template, and I kind of triggered it. But the reason I think that's really helpful, because if you're waking up like most people, they're waking up, running out the house, brushing their teeth, they're in actionary mode all day long. You're reacting. Most people will get up in the morning and they're checking their emails from work and figure out that's reactionary mode. So I'm really you're putting yourself in a position where I'm responding to everyone else's needs and wants. Now, if you live your life based on responding to everyone else's needs and wants, how in the world will you ever get to know your own worth? You can't, because you're literally in response mode. You wake up responding to texts, wake up responding to emails. You live in this reactionary life. In order to know your value, you have to stop that. And you have to start really thinking about, what do I want to be? Who do I believe I'm purposed to be? You got to start that. So I really believe one of the triggers for me 3 years ago was I really disciplined myself in that morning routine and start asking myself those questions, because Rich can't answer that. I can't answer that for people. Value comes from intrinsic value. It's self-worth, it's self-esteem. It's esteem of yourself, as Cat Williams would like to say. So it's esteem of yourself. So you got to know, what is self saying to you? What is that voice saying to you about who you are? And then staying true to that voice. And so I believe in listening to yourself, especially when it's telling you something healthy. Now, just because yourself tells you, I need to be in this toxic relationship because it makes, no, maybe you shouldn't listen to self then. Or it's like, I deserve to eat crazy on the weekends because I've been good all week. No, you shouldn't. Or if you're not where you need to be, don't do it. So I would say knowing worth is coming from self, but you got to spend time with self. And most people can't be quiet with themselves without a phone in your hand, without someone in your ear, without a TV on. Spending time with yourself is the best way of knowing yourself. And I think that's really important.
No, that's great. Well, we'll end on that, LeBrent. Thank you so much for your time and your knowledge. I hope we can get this information out to the community. There's so much work we have to do in the health space. Yeah. 48% of adults being obese in our community is not great.
Yeah, I would tell you just one fact, and by 2035, the World Obesity Federation report that over 51% of the world population will be obese, which will cost the world, that in 2035, $7 trillion a year. Wow. Which is the cost we paid for the whole pandemic, for $7 trillion. So listen, health really is wealth. So if you want to save your money, save your health.
Right. Do you want to say your website again one more time?
Yeah, so you can reach me at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. My Facebook, my website is LeBrentSpeed.org. It's being redone right now, but you can hit me up on Facebook or Instagram. There are not a lot of LeBrent Speeds out there, so it's just LeBrent Speed, and I love to talk to you and help you where I can.
Well, thank you, LeBrent. Thank you all for tuning in again to the Black and Rich Podcast. As I said, please get this out. We need to become healthier as a community. Health is wealth. We cannot build generational wealth without generational health. So hopefully see you next time. Have a great night. Thank you.